Hey everyone! Tonight we're stepping into the fog-wrapped streets of 1870s London, where gaslights flicker like uncertain promises and every door hides a different kind of survival. We'll follow women who navigate a world that offers them few choices but demands everything. This is a story about work, wages, and the complicated bargains people make when respectability costs more than they can afford. Before you settle in, take a moment to like the video and subscribe if you enjoy these long-form historical narratives. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is there. I read them all, usually late at night when the house is quiet. Now, dim those lights, maybe put on some soft background noise, and let's begin. Pull up your blanket. Victorian London is cold, and this story winds through places both harsh and surprisingly tender. You wake to the sound of bells. Not church bells calling the faithful, but workshop bells summoning the exhausted. It's 4 in the morning in Spitalfields, and the garment district is already stirring. Your fingers ache before you even move them. Last night you sewed until midnight, and the night before that, and the night before that. The needle has written its signature across your fingertips in small red dots that never quite heal. Your name is Mary, though it could be Sarah or Jane or any of the 1,000 names that filled the cramped rooms above and behind the draper shops. You're 23 years old, which makes you older than some and younger than many in this particular kind of work. You share a room with 3 other girls and the rent is 7 shillings a week, which sounds reasonable until you realize it's more than half of what you earn on a good week. The room smells of damp wool, coal smoke from the perpetually inadequate fireplace, and the particular staleness that comes from too many bodies breathing the same air night after night. There's frost on the inside of the window, delicate ferns of ice that would be beautiful if they weren't evidence of how cold you're going to be all day. You dress in the dark, trying not to wake the others, though you know they're all pretending to sleep, each calculating whether they have 10 more minutes before they absolutely must rise. Your dress is gray wool, mended so many times that the original fabric is almost outnumbered by the patches. Your shawl is thin but clean. You're particular about cleanliness, even when it means washing in water so cold it makes your hands cramp. The workshop is 3 streets away, a walk that takes 7 minutes if you hurry, which you always do. The morning air is thick with fog that smells of the Thames at low tide, mixed with the smoke from 10,000 breakfast fires. Other women move through the gray like shadows, all heading to their own particular forms of labor. You nod to a few familiar faces, but don't stop to chat. Time is money, and you have very little of either.
Mrs. Blackwood's establishment. That's what the sign says, though everyone calls it the sweatshop and not affectionately, occupies the 2nd and 3rd floors above a greengrocer. You climb the narrow stairs, already hearing the sound of the machines, the great treadles that drive the needles that turn fabric into garments that ladies will wear without ever thinking about the fingers that made them possible. The workshop is a long room with windows on one side, though they're so begrimed that the light barely struggles through. 2 rows of tables run the length of the room, and at each place sits a girl or woman, some as young as 14, some as old as 50, though the old ones are rare. Most don't last that long in this work. The lucky ones have the newer Singer machines. You have a hand crank machine that Mrs. Blackwood bought second-hand 15 years ago, and it jams approximately every 43 stitches. You've counted. Mrs. Blackwood herself sits at a high desk near the door, a ledger open before her, her spectacles catching what little light manages to enter. She's 62 years old and has run this establishment for 37 years. She's not cruel exactly, but she's practical in the way that people become when they've spent decades watching pennies turn into shillings and shillings turn into pounds, while the workers who make it possible remain perpetually poor. "Morning, Mary," she says without looking up. "You're 2 minutes late." You're not, but you don't argue. The time will come off your wages regardless. You take your seat and examine today's work. Shirts. Men's dress shirts for a Bond Street tailor who pays Mrs. Blackwood 1 shilling and 6 pence per finished shirt.
Mrs. Blackwood pays you 4 pence per shirt, and if you work from 4:30 in the morning until 10 at night, you can complete 7 shirts if the thread doesn't break and the machine doesn't jam and your eyes don't blur so badly that you make mistakes. 7 shirts means 2 shillings and 4 pence, which sounds almost reasonable until you subtract thread costs, tuppence, rent, a shilling a day, and food, if you're very careful, 6 pence for bread, tea, and perhaps a bit of cheese. That leaves you with 4 pence profit for a day that consumes 18 hours of your life. The mathematics of poverty are extremely precise. The room fills with the sound of machines and needles, a rhythmic clacking that sounds like a factory but is actually 23 women trying to survive. Some hum while they work, others are silent, faces set in concentration that's also a kind of absence. You learn to make your mind go elsewhere when your body must stay seated for so many hours. By mid-morning, your back aches in that particular way that means tonight you'll struggle to straighten up. Your eyes burn. Your fingers move automatically, guiding fabric under the needle with a precision born of repetition. This is your 10th year doing this work. You started at 13 when your mother died and left you with a younger brother to feed. He's apprenticed to a printer now, doing well, planning to marry. He doesn't know how close you came to different choices during those lean years. You don't think about that. Around noon, Mrs. Blackwood's assistant brings around tea, weak, sweet with cheap sugar, but hot, and you get 15 minutes to drink it and eat whatever you've brought. You have bread, yesterday's bread, that you bought half price from the baker at closing time. You eat it slowly, making it last, because the next meal won't come until you get home tonight. And home might have porridge if your roommate Sarah remembered to buy oats. The afternoon is the hardest part. Your body is tired, but not yet exhausted, so you feel every moment of discomfort. The light is bad and getting worse. Someone starts singing, Sweet Lavender, a music hall song that shouldn't be in a respectable establishment, but Mrs. Blackwood is in her office doing accounts, so the words drift over the machines like a small rebellion. Roses are shilling, lavender's free. When you marry your true love, remember me. You join in on the chorus because singing makes the time pass, and because there's something defiant about music in a place that tries to reduce you to fingers and output. By 5 o'clock, you've completed 4 shirts. By 8, you're on your 6th. Your eyes are watering so badly that you have to stop every few minutes to blot them with your sleeve. The woman next to you, Alice, is crying silently, tears running down her face, while her hands keep working. You don't ask why. Everyone cries in the workshop sometimes. The reasons vary, but the tears all look the same. At 9:30, Mrs. Blackwood makes her final round, examining work, counting finished pieces, making notes in her ledger. She pauses at your table. Mary, could you stay a moment after? Your stomach drops. Being asked to stay late either means extra work, which you desperately need, or it means being let go, which you desperately fear. The others file out, calling goodnight, their voices echoing in the stairwell. You stand by your machine, rolling your shoulders, trying to ease the knots that have formed like small stones under your skin. Mrs. Blackwood approaches, her face unreadable in the dimming lamplight. You're a good worker, Mary, reliable, never late. This is a lie, but you let it pass. Never sloppy. I've had a proposal I'd like to discuss with you. Your hands go cold. There's a gentleman, Mrs. Blackwood continues, who's asked me to recommend a respectable girl for a position in his household. Light housework, some mending, very comfortable situation. £3 a month, room and board included. £3 a month. It's more than twice what I make now. What's the situation? You ask carefully.
Mrs. Blackwood's face does something complicated. Not quite a smile, not quite a grimace. He's a widower, older gentleman. His regular housekeeper keeps the main establishment, but he has separate lodgings for when he works late. He needs someone reliable to keep them tidy. The room seems to shrink around you. You understand immediately what's being offered and what's not being said. Separate lodgings, light housework, £3 a month. I should mention, Mrs. Blackwood continues, that if you're not interested, there are other opportunities. I've had inquiries from several establishments, respectable houses. They're always looking for girls with good references. Establishments. The word hangs in the air like smoke. You think of your fingers, already gnarled at 23. You think of Alice crying at her machine. You think of your little room with 3 other women and frost on the windows. You think of mathematics. 4 pence per shirt, 7 shirts per day, 18 hours of labor. May I think about it? You ask.
Of course. But don't think too long. Opportunities don't wait, and winter's coming. Winter is hard for everyone, but it's especially hard for seamstresses. The light goes early, the cold makes fingers stiff, and gentlemen don't order as many shirts when the season's quiet. You walk home slowly, though the fog is thick and the streets aren't entirely safe. You need time to think. The mathematics of poverty are precise, but so are the mathematics of choice. Every woman in London knows the calculation. How much is respectability worth? How much is safety worth? How much is your time, your health, your body worth? At what point does survival become more important than reputation? The truth is that the line between respectable poverty and disreputable survival is thinner than most people want to admit. The seamstress who marries her landlord to forgive the rent, the shopgirl who accepts gifts from a customer, the governess who becomes a mistress, the actress who takes a protector, the wife who stays with a cruel husband because leaving means destitution. The city is full of women making calculations. You pass a brothel on your way home, not a grand establishment, but a house of accommodation, the kind where women rent rooms by the night and entertain their own visitors. The door is painted red, and there's a lamp burning in the window. A woman stands in the doorway, wrapped in a shawl against the cold. She's young, perhaps 18, and she's calling softly to men passing by. "Company for the evening, sir? Very reasonable rates. Clean room, clean girl." Most men hurry past, faces averted, though some slow their steps and glance back over their shoulders. The woman sees you watching and nods, one working woman to another. No judgment in her eyes, just a kind of tired solidarity. You wonder if she started as a seamstress too.
When you reach your lodgings, you climb the stairs slowly, your legs trembling with exhaustion. The room is dark except for a candle stub burning on the table. Sarah is already asleep, snoring softly. Emma is mending stockings by candlelight, her own side hustle, taking in work she does after her factory shift ends. Lizzie isn't home yet. She works at a music hall, selling oranges and programs, and her shifts run late. You collapse onto your thin mattress, not bothering to undress beyond removing your shoes. Your mind spins through possibilities like a wheel that won't stop turning. Mrs. Blackwood's offer, the widower's separate lodgings, £3 a month. What would you have to do to earn it? Would it be better or worse than 18 hours at a sewing machine? Would you be safer or more at risk? And the establishments she mentioned. Respectable houses, she'd called them, which is a very Victorian way of making something sound better than it is. Houses where women live and work, entertaining gentlemen, following rules, splitting their earnings with the madame who owns the place. Some of them are actually quite respectable in their own way. Clean, orderly, safe. Better than the streets, certainly. Better than some marriages, possibly. You think of the accounts you've heard, the stories that circulate among working women like currency. The girl who went into service and was dismissed without reference after the master's son took liberties. The flower seller who was offered a warm room and regular meals by a kind gentleman who turned cruel once she depended on him. The governess who fell in love with her employer and ended up with a baby and no position. The factory girl who accepted a drink from a stranger and woke up in a place she'd never wanted to be. But also, the woman who kept a house and saved enough to retire to a cottage in the country, the actress who married well after being kept comfortable for years, the courtesan who managed her own affairs and answered to no one, the survivors, the planners, the ones who played the game well enough to win something like freedom. The mathematics of choice are not simple. As you drift towards sleep, exhausted beyond thought, you picture a different life. A room with a fire that's always warm. Time to read a book. Hands that aren't destroyed by needles and thread. Enough food that you don't count every bite. The ability to help your brother, to send him money for his wedding, to be the generous older sister instead of the burden he's left behind. What price would you pay for that? The question follows you into dreams. The house on Mortimer Street looks respectable. From the outside, narrow brick front, clean windows, a brass plate that reads, Mrs. Hartwell, lodgings for single ladies. If you didn't know better, you'd think it was exactly what it claimed to be, a boarding house for unmarried women of the working class.
You're here because Emma, your roommate, suggested it. She has a cousin who has a friend who used to live here, and the word she used was safe. That's the currency among working women. Not good or bad, but safe or dangerous. You can endure almost anything if you're safe. Mrs. Hartwell receives you in a parlor that's surprisingly comfortable. There's a carpet on the floor, not new but not threadbare. The furniture is sturdy. There's even a fire in the grate, burning cheerfully, dispensing actual warmth. It's the kind of room that makes you acutely aware of how cold you've been for the past 6 years. Mrs. Hartwell herself is perhaps 50, dressed in a respectable black with a cameo at her throat. She could be anyone's aunt, someone who'd serve tea and discuss the sermon. Her eyes, however, are shrewd, assessing. She's built a business by reading people quickly and accurately. Emma's cousin spoke well of you, she begins, gesturing for you to sit. Said you're reliable, clean, discreet. Those are qualities I value. You nod, your hands folded in your lap, waiting. Let me be direct, as I find it saves time and prevents misunderstandings. This is a house of accommodation. Do you understand what that means? Yes, ma'am. Good. I don't run a brothel. I want to be clear about that. I'm not a madam, and the women who live here aren't my employees. They're tenants who rent rooms. What they do in those rooms is their business as long as they're quiet, clean, and pay their rent on time. This is a legal distinction that matters very much to Mrs. Hartwell and matters not at all to the women who live here. But it's the kind of distinction that keeps the police from raiding and keeps Mrs. Hartwell out of jail, so everyone maintains the fiction carefully. Room and board is 15 shillings a week. That includes 2 meals a day, breakfast and a late supper, and clean linens weekly. No gentlemen allowed in the common areas and no noise after midnight. You'll have your own room, not large but private, with a lock on the door. The key stays with you. 15 shillings a week is substantially more than you pay now, but then again, you'd be earning substantially more. How do the women who live here find their arrangements? You ask carefully. Mrs. Hartwell allows herself a small smile. Some have regular callers, gentlemen who visit on specific days, by appointment, very civilized. Others receive referrals from friends or from establishments that send overflow business our way. And some go out in the evenings to theaters or supper clubs and make their own arrangements. I don't manage that side of things. As I said, what they do is their business. You digest this. It's both more and less than you expected. There's no madam taking half your earnings. But there's also no protection, no guaranteed income, no one handling the dangerous parts.
Would you like to see a room? Mrs. Hartwell asks. You nod, and she leads you upstairs. The house is clean. That's the first thing you notice. The walls are papered in a modest pattern, no peeling or damp. The carpet runner on the stairs is worn but swept. You pass a woman on the landing, perhaps 30, respectably dressed, carrying a book. She nods politely as she passes. The room Mrs. Hartwell shows you is small but miraculous. A narrow bed with actual bedding, sheets, a pillow, a counterpane, a washstand with a basin and pitcher, a tiny wardrobe, a chair by the window, and the fire. Small grate, yes, but coal already laid, ready to light. The coal is included in your rent, Mrs. Hartwell says, reading your face. So is water for washing. There's a bathroom on each floor. You'll share with 3 other women. You think of the privy in the yard behind your current lodgings, the water you have to haul up 3 flights of stairs. If you take the room, you'll give me a week's rent in advance. After that, rent is due every Monday morning. Miss 2 payments and you're out. I can't be more generous than that. It's not sustainable. But as long as you pay on time and follow the rules, you can stay as long as you like. Some women have been here for years. You walk to the window. The room overlooks a small garden, mostly bare earth in winter, but you can imagine it green. The glass is clean enough to see through. There's a curtain you could draw for privacy. I should mention, Mrs. Hartwell says quietly, that if you're expecting this to be easy work, you're mistaken. The men who come here range from gentlemen to scoundrels, and telling them apart isn't always simple. You'll need to learn to read character quickly, to set boundaries and enforce them, to manage difficult situations without being able to call for help. The lock on your door is important. Use it. Never let someone in you're unsure about, and never let anyone convince you that agreeing to one thing means agreeing to everything. She pauses, then adds, some women see this as temporary, a few years to save money, then move on to something else. Some stay in this life for decades. Either way, you'll need to be smart about it. Save your money. Don't drink too much or use anything stronger. That's a fast road to ruin. Keep yourself clean and healthy, and don't imagine you're in love with every man who's kind to you. They're clients, not suitors, and confusing the two will break your heart. The speech has the feeling of something delivered many times, worn smooth by repetition, but still sincere. You think of the workshop, of Mrs. Blackwood's machines clattering like hungry teeth. You think of your hands, already damaged at 23. You think of winter coming, of cold rooms and thin soup, and calculations that never quite balance. I'd like to take the room, you hear yourself say. Mrs. Hartwell nods, as if this was inevitable. Then let's discuss the particulars. You'll start on Monday. That gives you the weekend to collect your things and think about whether this is truly what you want. If you change your mind, there's no judgment. This life isn't for everyone. But if you come on Monday with your rent money, then you're committed, at least until the week is up.
She leads you back downstairs, and in the parlor she pours tea, real tea, strong and sweet, and begins explaining the unwritten rules of the house. First, discretion. We don't discuss our residence with outsiders, and we don't discuss our visitors with anyone. What happens here, stays here. That's how we all stay safe. Second, health. There's a doctor who visits on Thursdays. He's discreet and not judgmental. If you're sick, you see him. If you're in trouble, you see him. Don't try to handle it yourself with herbs or back alley solutions. I've seen too many women die from that kind of stupidity. Third, money. What you earn is yours. I don't take a cut beyond the rent. But I suggest you open a post office savings account under a false name and put away at least half of everything you make. The women who survive this life are the ones who plan for its end. Fourth, violence. If a gentleman becomes rough, you scream. Someone will come. We don't tolerate that here, and there are consequences for men who don't behave properly. But prevention is better than response, so choose carefully who you let past your threshold. You sip your tea and try to imagine this life. Men you don't know. Intimacy as transaction. Your body as the commodity you're selling, or rather, your time and your company, with physicality implied but never explicitly discussed because that would make it prostitution, which is illegal, whereas renting a room is not. The Victorian genius for euphemism makes everything possible. The women who do well here, Mrs. Hartwell continues, are the ones who treat it like any other business. Be professional, be reliable. Set boundaries and enforce them. Don't drink or use drugs to get through it. That's a trap. And remember that you're selling a fantasy, not giving yourself away. The men who come here want to feel special, to feel chosen, to forget for a few hours that they're buying affection. If you can make them feel that way while keeping your actual self locked safely away, you'll do fine. She leans forward slightly. And Mary, that's your real name, isn't it? You'll want to choose a different one for work. Most women do. It helps keep things separate. Be someone else when you're working, and be yourself when you're not. The women who get lost are the ones who forget which is which. You leave the house on Mortimer Street with a strange feeling in your chest. Not quite hope, not quite dread, but something between them. The fog has lifted slightly, and the afternoon sun is trying to break through, turning London into a city of gray and gold. You walk aimlessly for a while, thinking. You pass shops you've never been able to afford, restaurants where clerks and shopgirls eat lunch, a park where nurses push prams containing the children of people who've never had to make calculations like yours. What you're considering isn't prostitution, or rather, it is, but it's a particular kind, one with rules and boundaries and a certain kind of respectability. The women in Mrs. Hartwell's house aren't streetwalkers. They're not desperate. They're making a choice that's constrained by circumstances, but a choice nonetheless.
Is that better? Is that worse? Or is it simply different? Another way of surviving in a city that offers women so few options. You think about Mrs. Blackwood's offer too, the widower with separate lodgings. That's more precarious, more isolated. At Mrs. Hartwell's house, there are other women, witnesses, safety in numbers. The widower might be kind, or he might not, and you'd have no recourse either way. This is the bargain that working women face. Which risk is more acceptable? The known degradation of poverty or the unknown risks of alternatives? By the time you return to your lodgings, you've made your decision. You'll take the room at Mrs. Hartwell's. You'll try it for 3 months, long enough to save real money, short enough that you can still return to the workshop if you hate it. You'll choose a working name, something respectable but memorable. Margaret, perhaps, or Caroline. You'll put half your earnings in a post office account under your real name, where it will accumulate towards some future you can barely imagine. A little shot, perhaps, or passage to America, where they say opportunities are better for women willing to work. And you'll keep this secret from your brother, from your old friends, from everyone who knew you before. You'll be 2 people. Mary, who used to be a seamstress and is now in service at a private household, and Margaret, who entertains gentlemen in a respectable house of accommodation on Mortimer Street. The split feels clean, necessary. dangerous. That night, you tell Sarah and Emma that you're taking a position in domestic service. Live in, good wages. They're happy for you, though Emma gives you a look that suggests she knows more than she's saying. Lizzie, the music hall girl, hugs you and makes you promise to visit. You don't tell them the truth. The truth is too complicated, and they wouldn't understand anyway. How can you explain that this feels like both a fall and a rise? That you're both ashamed and oddly hopeful? That survival requires so many compromises that you're no longer sure which parts of yourself are real and which are performance? On Friday, you give Mrs. Blackwood your notice. She doesn't seem surprised. "The widower's offer?" she asks. "Something like that," you reply, which is true enough. She nods. "You're not the first, won't be the last. Just be careful, Mary. The world isn't kind to women who make these choices, even when they're the only choices available." You work your last shift on Saturday, sewing shirts until your fingers are numb, knowing it's the last time you'll sit at that machine. Listen to that clatter, feel that particular kind of exhaustion. There's relief in that, and also fear, because at least this misery was familiar.
Sunday, you pack your few belongings into a carpet bag. Emma helps you, folding your spare shift, wrapping your hairbrush in a handkerchief. "You know you can come back if you need to," she says quietly. "We'll make room." You hug her, grateful for the kindness, knowing you can never come back, that this door is closing behind you. Monday morning, you carry your bag through foggy streets to Mortimer Street. Mrs. Hartwell opens the door herself, takes your rent money, and leads you to your room, with a fire and a lock and clean sheets. "There's breakfast at 8, she says, "and I should mention, one of the regular gentlemen has asked if there's a new girl. I gave him your working name. He'll call tomorrow evening at 7, if that's acceptable. He's reliable, pays well, not rough, a good first client, if you're ready." Your mouth goes dry. "What's his name?" "Mr. Collins. That's not his real name, of course, but it's how he goes by here. He's a banker, married, comes once a week. He'll stay an hour, perhaps 2. 15 shillings is the standard rate for an evening appointment. You negotiate the details yourselves. I don't involve myself in that." 15 shillings for 2 hours? You made that much in a week at the workshop. "I'll be ready," you say, though you're not sure it's true. Mrs. Hartwell pauses at the door. "Lock it behind me. Rest today. Tomorrow will be soon enough to begin your new life." She closes the door, and you hear her footsteps retreating down the hall. You turn the lock, feeling the bolt slide home with a solid click. Then you sit on the bed, your bed, and try to imagine tomorrow. A man you've never met will come to this room. You'll entertain him. He'll pay you money. Then he'll leave, and you will have survived your first transaction in this new economy. It won't make you a different person. You'll still be Mary underneath, still the girl who sewed shirts and ate half-price bread and calculated the cost of survival in shillings and pence. But outwardly, you'll be someone else, Margaret, who lives in a respectable house and receives gentlemen callers and makes enough money to save for some future that doesn't involve needles and thread and 18-hour days. Is that a fall or a rise? The mathematics are still precise, but they're more favorable now. That has to count for something. You lie back on the bed, staring at the ceiling, and listen to the house around you. Footsteps, voices, a door closing, someone singing softly. This is your life now. Your choice. Your survival. Tomorrow, you'll begin again.
You're 6 weeks into your new life at Mrs. Hartwell's when you discover there's another economy operating alongside the one you know. It starts with laundry. One of the house rules is that personal washing gets done at the commercial laundry 3 streets away. Mrs. Hartwell has an arrangement with them. You take your linens and clothing on Tuesday mornings, pick them up on Thursdays, and the bill gets added to your weekly rent. It's convenient, efficient, and as you soon discover, it's also a front for something more interesting. The first time you visit Swan Street Laundry, you're struck by the steam. It pours from the windows like dragon's breath, turning the street into a warm fog that smells of soap and hot water. Inside, the noise is incredible. The slap of wet fabric, the creaks of mangles, the shouts of women coordinating their work. Heat radiates from great copper boilers that seem medieval in their scale and ferocity. A thin woman with iron-gray hair takes your bundle and checks your name against a ledger. "Mrs. Hartwell's, are you? Right, we know the account. Have it ready Thursday." You're about to leave when another woman approaches, younger perhaps, 30, with the kind of practical face that suggests she's solved most of life's problems and found them tedious. "You're new at Mrs. H's?" she asks. "About a month," you reply cautiously. "Thought so. You've got that look, still deciding if this was a good idea." She grins to show she's teasing. "I'm Nell. I run the private writing service here. Mrs. Hartwell mentioned you used to be a seamstress?" "That's right." "Then you can read and write. Proper hand, I mean, not just your name." "Yes. I had 3 years of school before my mother died." Nell's eyes sharpen with interest. "Come to the back room a minute. There's something you should see." You follow her through the steaming chaos of the main laundry to a small room in the rear that's miraculously dry and relatively quiet. A desk sits against one wall, covered with papers, ink bottles, and what appears to be several different styles of stationery. "This," Nell says, "is where I run my private writing service. Do you know what that is?" You shake your head. "All right, sit down and I'll explain. There's a market, quite a large one, actually, for correspondence, personal letters, love letters specifically, written for people who need them but can't write them themselves." She sees your confusion and elaborates. "Say you're a gentleman who's carrying on a correspondence with a lady, or thinks he is. He writes to her care of a post office box or a tobacconist who forwards mail. She writes back, witty letters, affectionate letters, letters that make him feel special. He's happy, she's happy, everyone's making money. But who is she?" Nell grins. "That's where we come in. The woman he's writing to might be real, maybe someone he met once or knows slightly. But the letters, they're written by professionals, by me and the women I employ. We write dozens of letters a week, all in different hands, all for different correspondents. It's quite an art." You're beginning to understand. "It's a fraud. It's a service," Nell corrects firmly. "These men want romance, affection, the feeling of being important to someone. We provide that feeling. They're happy to pay for it, far more than they'd pay for a simple encounter. And the women who employ us get a steady income without the physical risks. Some prefer it that way." You study the desk, the careful organization of different papers and inks. "How does it work?" "Simple enough. A gentleman pays a subscription, say £2 for 6 months of weekly correspondence. He writes to an address, we have several post office boxes, and his letters come to me. I read them, get a sense of his character and what he's looking for. Then I either write the responses myself or assign them to one of my writers. Each letter is crafted to sound like it's from the same person, keeping the voice consistent, building a relationship over time." "And the men never realize?" "Some might suspect, but they don't want to know for certain. They're paying for the fantasy, for the feeling. Same as any other transaction in this city, just more clothed in romance. The beauty is that it's completely legal. There's no law against writing letters for money. She pulls out a leather-bound ledger. I currently employ 4 writers. They work from home mostly, women like you who need income but want something less physically demanding. I pay 3 pence per letter, and a good writer can produce 3 or 4 letters a day. That's a shilling a day for work you can do in your own room at your own pace. The mathematics shift in your mind. A shilling a day, 7 days a week, would be 7 shillings, nearly half what you paid in rent at Mrs. Hartwell, earned without ever leaving your room, without entertaining anyone. What would I need to do? I'd need to see your handwriting first, several samples in different styles. Then I'd have you write a test letter based on a prompt I'd give you. If the work is good, you'd start with easy assignments, replies to simple, straightforward letters. As you prove yourself, you'd get more complex correspondences, ones that pay better because they require more skill. She leans forward. The trick is understanding what men want when they write these letters. They're not looking for Shakespeare. They're looking for someone who makes them feel seen, understood, desired. Someone who asks about their day and actually seems to care about the answer. Someone who's witty but not threatening, affectionate but not demanding. Always pleased to hear from them, but never reproachful when they don't write. It sounds exhausting in its own way. Oh, it is. You're managing multiple personalities, keeping track of who you've told what, maintaining consistency across weeks and months. But it's exhausting like a game of chess is exhausting, mental rather than physical. Your hands won't be destroyed by it, your body won't give out. You think of Mr. Collins, your regular Tuesday evening appointment. A kind enough man, lonely more than lustful, who mostly wants to talk about his difficult wife and his ungrateful children. You've become skilled at listening, at making sympathetic noises, at being whatever he needs you to be for those 2 hours. How different is that, really, from writing letters? I'd like to try, you say. Nell nods, satisfied. Come back tomorrow morning, before the laundry gets busy. Bring writing samples. 3 different hands if you can manage it. Different styles, different moods. Show me you can be versatile. That night, you sit at the small table in your room with paper you've bought from the stationers and practice. Your everyday hand, the one you learned in school, is clear and serviceable, but you remember your mother's hand, more elaborate with decorative flourishes. And you've seen enough ladies' correspondence at the workshop to know what fashionable writing looks like. You practice for hours, filling pages with different scripts. A young girl's enthusiastic scrawl, a mature woman's elegant flow, a middle-class lady's careful propriety. Each one a character study, a small fiction you've created. Each one feels true, even though it's entirely manufactured.
The next morning, you bring your samples to Nell. She reads them slowly, her face giving nothing away. Finally, she looks up. These are good, really good. The widow letter especially. You've captured that particular kind of loneliness that makes men feel needed. All right, I'll give you a trial assignment. She hands you a letter written in a clerk's careful hand. The man, he signs himself W.G., has written to Miss Eleanor, describing his dull week at the office, his boring landlady, his dreams of someday having enough money to marry respectably. It's painfully earnest, achingly lonely. Miss Eleanor is one of our most popular correspondents, she explains. She's warm, encouraging, sees the best in everyone. She makes men like W.G. feel like they're heroes in their own stories. Write her reply, no more than 2 pages, friendly but not forward, encouraging but not committal. Have it back to me by Friday. You take the letter home like a treasure. That evening, instead of going down to the parlor where some of the other women gather, you stay in your room and work. You read W.G.'s letter 3 times, getting a sense of him. He's lonely. He's trying to better himself. He needs someone to believe in him. So, Eleanor will believe in him. Not blindly, but with specific observations about his strengths, his potential. You write about how his dedication to his work shows character, how saving money proves his worthiness as a future husband, how any woman would be fortunate to be courted by someone so conscientious. You ask gentle questions about his interests, his dreams, his family. You create the feeling of genuine interest, genuine care. When you deliver it to Nell on Friday, she reads it once, then again more slowly. This is excellent work. You understand the assignment completely. I'm putting you on the regular rotation. You'll get 3 letters a week to start. I'll deliver them Tuesdays. You'll return the replies by Fridays. That's 9 pence a week guaranteed. More if I have overflow work that needs handling. 9 pence might not sound like much compared to what you earn from clients, but it's income that requires no physical presence, no performance beyond words on paper. It's income you can earn while drinking tea, while recovering from difficult appointments, while simply being yourself. Over the next few weeks, you discover you have a talent for this work. You're assigned more correspondents, men writing to various fictional women who exist only as voices on paper. You keep careful notes, maintaining consistency across weeks and months. Mr. W.G. becomes interested in gardening, so Eleanor develops an interest in gardens. Captain R.F. mentions his service in India, so Miss Caroline asks thoughtful questions about his experiences. Dr. M.H. writes poetry, so Mrs. Anna responds with gentle literary criticism. Each correspondent gets a woman who's perfectly suited to him. Not real, but real enough. Real enough that they keep writing, keep paying, keep pouring out their hopes and fears to someone who seems to truly listen. You begin to understand something about the economies women operate in. There's the visible economy, the wages paid for sewing or factory work or service. And there's the invisible economy, the emotional labor, the performance of femininity, the carefully calibrated responses that men pay for without always realizing they're paying. Whether you're entertaining Mr. Collins in your room or writing letters as Eleanor to W.G., you're doing the same work, providing comfort, affirmation, the feeling of being understood. The only difference is proximity. It's Sarah, your old roommate from the seamstress days, who introduces you to the society. She tracks you down 3 months after you left the workshop. You'd given her Mrs. Hartwell's address, carefully framed as your new position in service. She arrives on a Wednesday afternoon, respectably dressed but clearly nervous about entering such an establishment. Mrs. Hartwell allows the visit. She's practical about these things. And you receive Sarah in the small sitting room that residents can use for personal visitors. "Mary," she says, and there are tears in her eyes. "I need help." Your stomach drops. What's happened? "I'm in trouble. The usual kind." Her hand moves unconsciously to her belly, still flat beneath her dress. "It was the foreman at the workshop. He promised... Well, it doesn't matter what he promised. He's made it clear he won't help, and I can't afford to lose my position, but I can't hide it much longer." You take her hands. They're as rough as yours used to be, marked by needlework, cold despite the warm room. "How far along?" 3 months, maybe 4. I went to see a woman in Whitechapel, but she wanted £2, and I don't have it. I've been trying to save, but the rent, the food..." She trails off into the mathematics you know too well. £2. A fortune for a seamstress, but manageable for you now. You've been saving carefully, following Mrs. Hartwell's advice, building towards some future you can't quite see. But Sarah is here, now, desperate. "I'll help you," you say immediately. "I have the money." You can't ask you to..." "You're not asking, I'm offering. Come back Saturday afternoon. I'll have it ready." After Sarah leaves, trembling with relief and gratitude, you sit in your room and think, Sarah won't be the last. There are thousands of women in London facing the same crisis. Women seduced by employers or sweethearts. Women raped by masters or clients. Women whose careful precautions failed anyway. Some of them have friends or family who can help. Most don't. An idea begins to form. That evening you mention it to Mrs. Hartwell. She listens carefully, her shrewd eyes assessing.
You're talking about creating a mutual aid society, a benefit club for working women. Yes, we all know women who've needed help for doctors, for confinements, for emergencies. What if we organized small contributions from those who can afford it, distributed to those who need it? It's been tried before, Mrs. Hartwell says. There are friendly societies, sick clubs, that kind of thing. But they don't help women in certain situations for obvious reasons. The respectable ones won't touch anything connected to moral irregularity. Exactly. So we need an unrespectable one. Mrs. Hartwell actually smiles. I like how you think. It would need to be discreet. No public meetings, no published membership lists. Women would need to be vouched for by existing members. And you'd need rules about contributions and distributions to keep it sustainable. Would you allow meetings here? In the private parlor upstairs, yes. Tuesday afternoons when it's quiet. But I won't be directly involved. This is your project. I'll simply provide the space. You start small. You, Sarah, once she's recovered from her ordeal, Emma from your old lodgings, 2 other women from Mrs. Hartwell's house, and Nell from the laundry. 6 women, each contributing 6 pence a week into a collective fund. The rules are simple. Members contribute what they can afford, with a minimum of 3 pence weekly. Money is lent or given based on need, with priority to emergencies. All requests are heard without judgment. Absolute discretion. Names and situations are never discussed outside meetings. New members must be vouched for by 2 existing members. The first emergency fund helps a factory girl whose hand was crushed in machinery. The second helps a shop worker evicted by her landlady for being pregnant. The third pays for a doctor when one of Mrs. Hartwell's residents contracts fever. Word spreads carefully through networks of working women. By the end of 6 months, there are 23 members. By the end of a year, 47. The fund grows from shillings to pounds, carefully recorded in a ledger you keep locked in your room. You learn things in those Tuesday meetings. You learn that working women have created dozens of small economies to survive, taking in washing, doing piecework, sharing rooms and food, lending money at fair rates to each other when the pawnbrokers charge too much. You learn that many women engage in occasional prostitution during slow seasons, strategic transactions that keep them fed until regular work resumes. You learn that the line between respectability and ruin is crossed and recrossed constantly, that survival requires flexibility.
You also learn that your particular position, living at Mrs. Hartwell's, earning from both clients and letter writing, gives you unusual stability. You're not rich, but you're secure in ways most working women aren't. It creates a responsibility. One Tuesday, a woman named Catherine asks for help that isn't financial. She's a governess who's been dismissed without reference after refusing her employer's advances. She needs a character reference to secure new employment, but she has none. "I can write you one," you say, and then realize, actually, I can write you several, in different hands, from different fictional employers. They won't stand up to thorough investigation, but for most positions, they'll be sufficient. Catherine looks shocked, then grateful, then calculating. Could you do that for others? And so the society adds another service. Using your letter-writing skills and Nell supplies, you create reference letters for women whose positions ended in ways that make honest references impossible. They're not quite forgeries, you never claim to be a real person, but they're useful fictions that help women re-enter the legitimate economy. The moral ambiguity doesn't escape you. You're helping women lie their way into respectability, but you're also helping them survive, giving them chances they'd otherwise lack. Mrs. Hartwell, watching the society grow, observes, "You're building a shadow economy for women who've been pushed into shadows. It's practical, I'll grant you. Just be careful. The authorities don't like it when poor people organize, especially poor women. She's right to be cautious. By the end of your second year at Mrs. Hartwell's, the society has over 60 members and has distributed more than £30 in aid. That's enough money to attract attention, enough organization to seem threatening. It's also enough to change lives. Women who would have been forced onto the streets find emergency funds to tide them over. Women who would have died from botched abortions get access to safe doctors. Women who would have lost their children to poorhouses receive temporary support until they can work again. You think of yourself at 23, sewing shirts for 18 hours a day, calculating whether survival was worth the cost. Now, at 26, you're still calculating, but the mathematics have changed. You're not just surviving, you're helping others survive. Is it respectable? No. Is it moral? Ambiguous. Is it necessary? Absolutely. The past arrives on your doorstep on a rainy Thursday evening in the form of your brother Thomas. You haven't seen him in nearly 3 years. You've been carefully maintaining the fiction that you work in domestic service for a wealthy but reclusive household, using that excuse to avoid family visits. You send him money occasionally, contributions you frame as savings from generous wages, and receive occasional letters about his life, his work at the printers, his wife, the baby that's coming.
Now he's standing in Mrs. Hartwell's parlor, water dripping from his coat, looking around with the barely concealed horror of someone who's just realized the truth. "Mary," he says, and your name sounds like an accusation. Mrs. Hartwell, ever practical, withdraws to give you privacy. You stand facing your brother, the little boy you raised after your mother died, who you sacrificed so much to keep fed and clothed and apprenticed, who's looking at you now like you're a stranger. "How did you find me?" "I ran into Sarah from your old workshop. She didn't mean to tell me, but when I mentioned I was worried because I'd sent letters to your service address and they'd been returned, she let slip where you really lived." His voice is tight, controlled. "A house of accommodation, Mary? This is what you chose?" "This is what I had to choose," you correct quietly. "Do you remember those years after Mother died? Do you remember how we nearly starved? I remember you working at the workshop. I remember calculating whether I could afford an extra slice of bread for you. I remember having to decide between buying you shoes and eating myself. I remember being 20 years old and feeling 50. You keep your voice steady, refusing to be ashamed. "I was dying there, Thomas. Slowly but certainly. My hands were destroyed, my health was failing, and I was earning just enough to starve slowly instead of quickly. So you became a—" He can't say the word. "I became someone who gets paid fairly for her labor," I finish. "I work fewer hours, earn more money, and have actual security. I've saved more in 3 years here than I could have saved in 30 years at the workshop. But at what cost? Your reputation, your soul?" "My reputation?" You laugh, but it's not a happy sound. "Thomas, I had no reputation. I was a poor seamstress in Spitalfields. No one cared if I lived or died except as it affected their shirt orders. And my soul? I think God understands desperation better than you do." He's silent, struggling. You can see him trying to reconcile the sister who raised him with the woman standing before him in a house he's been taught to despise. "I've helped dozens of women," you continue, "through the society we've organized, women who were where I was, desperate, running out of options, calculating which form of survival was least destructive. I've given them money, references, support. I've kept women from dying, kept children from workhouses, kept families from complete destitution. With money earned from from providing a service that men clearly want badly enough to pay for. Don't pretend this is about morality, Thomas. This is about the fact that I've violated the rules that say women should suffer in silence, rather than make choices you find uncomfortable. The silence stretches between you, filled with rain drumming on windows and the distant sound of voices from other parts of the house. Finally, Thomas says, "I'm not here to judge you. I'm here because Margaret is pregnant and we're struggling. The printer hasn't paid me in 6 weeks and we're behind on rent. I came to ask if you could lend us some money before I knew." He gestures vaguely at the house around him. The irony is almost too much. He came for money, money you earned in ways he despises, money he now feels conflicted about accepting. "How much do you need?" £3 would see us through, until the printer pays me. £3. A single month's rent at Mrs. Hartwell's. 2 weeks of regular appointments. 20 letters written. The calculations are automatic now. "Wait here." You go to your room and count out £3 from your savings. Coins that represent hours of your life, but in very different forms. You wrap them in a handkerchief and return to the parlor. "Here. You don't have to pay it back. Consider it a gift for the baby." Thomas takes the money, staring at it like it might contaminate him. "I can't take this." "Yes, you can, because Margaret needs it, and the baby needs it, and your pride is less important than their survival. That's something I learned early, Thomas. Sometimes survival means accepting help from sources you'd rather not acknowledge." He pockets the money, looking miserable. "This doesn't mean I approve." "I don't need your approval. I need you to understand that I'm the same person I always was. I'm still the sister who raised you, still the woman who went without so you could eat. I just found a way to stop going without." "Will you stop? Eventually. Find some other way?" "I consider lying, but he deserves truth." "I don't know. Probably. When I've saved enough to open a shop or invest in something sustainable, but maybe not. Maybe this is my life now, and I've learned to live with it. I don't know how to tell Margaret about this." "Don't. Tell her I work in service, which is true enough. I do provide a service. Tell her I'm doing well, which is also true. The details don't matter."
Thomas leaves shortly after, clearly relieved to escape. You watch him go, wondering if you'll see him again, wondering if you'll tell his wife the truth, wondering if this is the cost of the choices you've made, the slow severing of ties to your old life. That night, lying in your comfortable bed in your warm room, you think about the 2 versions of yourself that Thomas saw. The sister he remembered, who sacrificed everything for him, and the woman he found, who survives in ways he can't accept. But they're the same person. You're the same person. The only difference is that now you're paid fairly for your labor, whether that labor is physical, emotional, or imaginative. The Victorian world creates these impossible double standards. Men can visit places like Mrs. Hartwell's without losing respectability, but women who work there are fallen. Men can write love letters to fictional women without shame, but women who write those letters back are deceitful. Men can demand endless emotional labor from wives and mothers and daughters without payment, but when women charge for the same service, it's degrading. You're not fallen. You're not degraded. You're surviving in a system designed to make survival impossible for women like you. And you're doing it on your own terms, building your own economy, helping other women do the same. If that makes you disreputable, so be it.
You'd rather be disreputable and secure than respectable and starving. You wake to fog pressing against your window, turning the world beyond into suggestion rather than certainty. It's been 4 years since you left Mrs. Blackwood's workshop, 4 years since you walked through Mrs. Hartwell's door with everything you owned in a carpetbag and fear singing in your blood. Now you're 27 years old. Your hands are no longer destroyed by needles. The scars have faded, replaced by softer marks from pen and ink. Your savings account holds £63, more money than you ever imagined having. The society has grown to 92 members and has distributed over £100 in aid. You've also fallen in love, which wasn't part of the plan. His name is James, though he calls himself something else when he visits. He's an architect who started coming to Mrs. Hartwell's 2 years ago, recently widowed, awkward and lonely in ways that touched something in you. Unlike most clients, he wanted to talk more than anything else about his work, about buildings and beauty, about the grief of losing someone you'd built a life with. You talked, you listened, you became friends, which wasn't supposed to happen. Mrs. Hartwell's warning echoes, "Don't confuse clients with suitors. Don't imagine you're in love." But James kept coming, not just for appointments, but for conversation. And somewhere in those hours, friendship shifted into something deeper.
3 months ago, he proposed marriage. You said you'd think about it, which you've been doing ever since. Because marriage means leaving this life, leaving Mrs. Hartwell's, leaving the society, leaving the security you've built. It means becoming dependent again, legally and financially erased, absorbed into someone else's identity. But it also means respectability regained. It means children, if you want them. It means aging in a society that's brutal to women who age without husbands. It means love, if you trust what you feel for James and what he claims to feel for you. The mathematics of this choice are more complex than any you faced. There's a knock on your door. Soft, tentative. Mary? It's Nell. You open the door to find Nell and 3 other society members. Emma, Catherine, the governess you helped, and Rose from the laundry. "We need to talk," Nell says, "about the society, about its future." They settle into your small room, perching on the bed and the chair, and Nell speaks plainly. "You've been different these past months, distracted. We think you're planning to leave. You could deny it, but these women know you too well. James has asked me to marry him. I haven't decided yet. But you're considering it, which means we need to plan for the society to continue without you. You've been its heart since the beginning, but good organizations survive their founders." "I haven't even decided." "Decide," Nell says firmly. "Don't drift into this decision because it seems easier than choosing. Look at what you've built here. Look at what you'd be giving up. Then look at what you'd gain, and choose deliberately." She's right. You've been avoiding the choice, hoping circumstances would somehow make it for you. But that's not how you've lived these past 4 years. You've been deliberate, calculating, strategic. This decision deserves the same approach. "Tell me honestly, can the society function without me?" "Yes," Catherine says. "We've been preparing for this. Nell can handle the finances. I can coordinate meetings. Emma can manage the reference letters. You've trained us well. We don't need you anymore, though we'd rather have you." "And if I stay? If I turn down James's proposal?" "Then you stay," Rose says simply. "This work will still be here. There will always be women who need help, always men willing to pay for company, always a demand for the services we provide."
"But you won't be young forever," Emma adds quietly. "None of us will. At some point, we all have to think about how we'll survive when we're 40, 50, 60.
Marriage is one answer to that question. Not the only answer, but a legitimate one. They leave you to think, these women who've become more than colleagues, who've become something like sisters. Each of them has made similar calculations, chosen their own paths through the maze of limited options. You spend the day walking through London, retracing paths you've taken over the years, past the workshop where you nearly died of slow exhaustion, past your old lodgings where 4 of you shared a freezing room, past the brothel where you saw the young woman calling to passers-by, past the laundry and the markets and the churches and the theaters. This city has been your adversary and your salvation. It's offered you nothing and given you everything, forced you into impossible choices and provided unexpected opportunities. By evening, you've decided. You send a note to James. Yes, but with conditions we must discuss. When he arrives that night, not as a client but as a suitor, you're direct. I'll marry you, but I need certain assurances. I want a separate bank account in my own name. I want to continue my charitable work. You don't need to know the details, but I need your word you won't interfere. And I want honesty between us. You know what I've done these past 4 years. I won't pretend to be something I'm not. James, wonderful James, simply nods. I know exactly who you are. That's who I'm marrying. Your family won't approve. Society won't approve. Let them disapprove. I've lived for others' approval my whole life, following rules that made me miserable. I want to build something true, even if it's unconventional. You marry quietly 3 months later in a small church, far from where either of you is known. Mrs. Hartwell hosts a modest wedding breakfast, and the society women attend, creating the oddest assemblage of guests any Victorian wedding has seen. You leave Mrs. Hartwell with your savings, your ledgers, your carefully maintained correspondence files. You leave behind a room where you learned to separate yourself from what you did, where you discovered you could survive things you'd thought would destroy you. The house James takes you to is comfortable, not wealthy, but secure. There's a study where you can continue writing letters, though you tell James they're helping friends with correspondence. There's a parlor where society meetings can continue. There's a future that feels less precarious than any you've imagined. 5 years after your marriage, you're in the study when your daughter, 3 years old, named Ruth after your mother, asks what you're writing.
Letters for friends, you tell her, which is partially true. You're still writing correspondence for Nell's service, still working with the society, now called the Benevolent Ladies Guild to sound more respectable, still helping women navigate the impossible choices you once faced. But you're doing it from a position of security you couldn't have imagined that morning in Mrs. Blackwood's workshop when you were 23 and calculating whether survival was worth the cost. James knows some of what you do. Not everything. There are kindnesses in partial honesty, but enough. He knows you help women in difficult circumstances. He knows your past. He loves you anyway, perhaps because of it rather than despite it. Your brother Thomas visits occasionally, still uncomfortable, but trying. His children play with Ruth, oblivious to the complicated histories that brought them together. Margaret, his wife, treats you with careful courtesy. She knows, or suspects, but has chosen to focus on the present rather than the past. The society now has over 200 members and has helped more than 500 women over the years. Some have gone on to Respectability, using the references and aid to re-enter conventional life. Others have found stability in unconventional ways, building careers as letter writers, laundresses, seamstresses who own their own shops. A few have become wealthy, marrying well or investing wisely. All of them survived. That's what matters. In a world designed to make survival impossible for women like you, you all found ways to survive.
Sometimes in the evenings, when the house is quiet and Ruth is asleep and James is reading by the fire, you think about that morning in the workshop. The exhausted girl you were, fingers bleeding, calculating the cost of another day, another shirt, another breath. You think about the mathematics of poverty, how precise they were, how cruel. And you think about the mathematics of choice, how you learned to calculate different equations, how you found ways to make the numbers add up in your favor. You're not the same person you were at 23, but you're not entirely different either. You're still calculating, still helping others calculate, still believing that survival, however you manage it, is worth the cost. Outside, London continues its evening routine. Somewhere in this vast city, a young woman is sitting at a sewing machine, calculating whether she can afford bread tomorrow. Somewhere, another woman is standing in a doorway, calling softly to passing men. Somewhere, another is writing letters to strangers, creating fantasies for money. They're all surviving. They're all making calculations. They're all doing what women have always done, finding ways to endure in a world that would prefer they quietly disappear.
You don't regret your choices. Not the workshop years that taught you the cost of respectability. Not the years at Mrs. Hartwell's that taught you the cost of survival. Not the marriage that gave you security but could have cost you independence. You chose deliberately, each time calculating the mathematics of survival with clear eyes and steady hands. And you survived. That's worth something, perhaps everything. As Ruth stirs in her sleep upstairs and James turns a page of his book and London breathes its evening fog against your windows, you allow yourself a moment of quiet satisfaction. You built this life from threads and calculations, from choices made in fog-wrapped streets and cramped rooms. You built it with letters and labor, with compromise and creativity, with help from women who understood that survival sometimes requires unconventional mathematics. The Victorian world wanted you to choose between respectability and survival, between morality and security, between what was proper and what was possible. Instead, you chose yourself. You chose survival. You chose life. And in doing so, you helped hundreds of other women make the same choice. That's your legacy. Not what you did to survive, but that you survived at all, and that you made it possible for others to survive too. The mathematics are still complex, but for the first time in your life, they balance in your favor. And that, finally, is enough. Thank you for listening to this journey through Victorian London's hidden economies. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the complicated choices working women faced, please like the video and subscribe for more long-form historical narratives. Leave a comment sharing your thoughts. These stories matter, not because they're comfortable, but because they're true to the experiences of thousands of women who navigated impossible circumstances with courage and creativity. Until next time, take care of yourselves. And remember, survival is its own form of resistance.